Hello everyone, my name is Geraldine and my topic is terrorism in the US. My introduction, mass shootings, hate crime, and domestic terrorism have increased in the US within the last 21 years. These violent crimes were committed by terrorist groups, individuals with ideological goals, and lone wolves whose crimes were intended to intimidate, coerce civilians and the government. The U.S. has tried to stop these attacks by implementing new policies, creating counterterrorism groups, and identifying financial supporters of terrorism. Many of these attackers were recruited or radicalized through social media. So the key issues for my topic. I'm going to be very brief for this. I'm going to give a brief description of the definitions for international terrorism. Is defined as violent criminal acts committed by foreign terrorist organizations or nations. Domestic terrorism defined is also violent crimes committed by a terrorist group, but in this case, it's talking about domestic terrorism, like domestic groups. And lone wolf offenders is defined as individuals who were radicalized online and don't have a clear affiliation or guidance. Terrorism and social media. Many international terrorist groups have used social media to send threats, recruit new members, or to obtain financial help. International and domestic violent extremists have developed an extensive presence on the internet through messaging platforms and online images and videos and publications. Terrorist online publications are usually posted on YouTube because YouTube gives them the virtual access they need to post videos to inspire others and to ensure extremist movement. There are also unique websites such as Halumu and Shot, I don't know if I pronounced it right, which are found in the clear net, and they were created for jihadist groups to have more access in the media. Famous international domestic terrorist groups and their ideologies. I'm sure you guys have heard about different international and domestic groups throughout the years, but the most famous I was able to find for international was the Islamic State, Al-Qaeda, Al-Shabaab, and the Taliban, and their ideology is usually religion, but they also express a combination of psychological, and social and economic factors. For domestic terrorism, I was able to find the KKK, the neo-Nazi, and the white nationalist, and they are inspired by extremist ideology, and most of the attackers for domestic terrorists are young men with access to guns who have been socially isolated and influenced by extremist ideology. Terrorist attacks. The most famous international terrorist attack that the U.S. has experienced was the 9/11 attack that killed approximately 3,000 people and injured thousands of them. A famous domestic terrorist attack was the one committed by Dylan Roof, who was a white supremacist, and he was motivated to kill 9 people, 9 Black African Americans who were attending the church because he wanted to start a race war. Because of this type of terrorist attacks, we have seen lately a lot of lone wolf attacks, especially within the last 10 years. And some of the lone wolves that committed attacks in the last 10 years were Sion Hee-Chu, who killed 32 people in Virginia Tech, Salvador Ramos, who killed 21 people in Rove Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas, Omar Mateen, who killed 49 people at a nightclub in Orlando, Adam Lanza, who killed 26 people at Sandy Hook Elementary School, Stephen Paddock, who killed 58 people at a Harvest Music Festival in Las Vegas, and Nidal Matik Hassan, who killed 13 people at Fort Hood, Texas. Here's a chart of deaths from terrorism from the year 2000 to 2020. As we can see in the chart, the year 2001 was the one that recorded the most people that died because of terrorism, and the second highest number happened in 2017. The second chart shows active shooter incidents that happened between the year 2000 and 2020. As we can see in the chart, the year 2020 was the one that recorded the most incidents, with 40 incidents committed by active shooters. Policies against terrorism. In an effort to stop terrorism, the U.S. government has created laws against terrorism. For the government to create new policies and enforce laws against terrorism, the definition of terrorism has to be very clear. As we can see on the right side, there are 3 steps that the government needs to follow in order to create a new policy against terrorism. Sentencing. Just like in any other courtroom, there are a significant amount of legal issues that need to be addressed before any penalty can be applied to sentence a terrorist, such as witnesses, evidence, charges, bond, right to speedy trial, lawyers, human rights, and sentencing. If found guilty of terrorism, a terrorist could spend the rest of their life in prison or face the death penalty. One recent case I was able to find was a terrorist who was sentenced to 17 years in prison. His name was Mustafa Musab. He pleaded guilty on September 16 of 2021 to 1 count of attempting to provide material to support ISIS. Theoretical review. Theories have been developed to describe how terrorists think and operate and to predict what motivates terrorists to attack. I was able to find 2 good theories. The first one is the lone wolf conceptual theory that talks about how lone wolves attack civilians more than government or military targets, and they're less concerned than group-based terrorist actors with garnering public support. Becker, who was the analyst for this, confirms that the findings from previous studies, the lone wolves in the United States use firearms as the means of attack. The second theory I found was the leaders versus followers theory. It says that leaders may not only be motivated to pursue group goals, but they also have more psychological capable than followers to commit violent acts, and followers may have more gain from committing violent action. Methodological issues. The first methodological issue I wrote on my paper was collecting data, which includes information on domestic terrorist activities for persons investigated for terrorism by the FBI. This database included identifying characteristics of communities where persons indicted under terrorism charges lived, planned, and prepared prior to carrying out their terrorist act. The strength about this methodology methodological issue included a comparison of data from past incidents. Part of the data used was collected by the FBI in improving the validity of the data collected. The weaknesses of this methodology included failing to include observations, tests, simulation, interviews, and surveys. And this limits the methodology because it only uses past data collected and excludes any other information. My secondary data analysis was that federal investigators interviewed more than 15,000 persons of interest in connection with activities that the investigators associated with terrorism. This was defined broadly to include crimes such as passports and marriage fraud, money laundering, drug smuggling, and the purchase of weapons of mass destruction. The strengths for this methodology included interviews, investigations, and different crime categories such as drugs, money laundering, fraud, and weapons. By using this methodology, investigators can obtain lots of leads, evidence, and information that can help them prosecute and keep behind bars possible terrorists. The weaknesses of this methodology include very broad crime category, and due to the high number of criminals participating in this methodology, investigators have a long list of categories that include possible terrorists, but the methodology is not specifically used for terrorists. Ethical concerns. The media has revealed how terrorist attacks may have little to no media coverage. Some terrorist attacks are extensively covered if the perpetrator is Muslim. The media may frame terrorism as a specifically Muslim problem because that is a dominant narrative. Domestic terrorism is often portrayed as a minor threat committed by mental ill perpetrators, whereas terrorism influenced by a radical interpretation of Islam is framed as hostile outside force. The media has also revealed that terrorism attacks get more attention in media coverage if the perpetrator is foreign-born, gets arrested, stands trial, gets sentenced. Domestic attacks committed by perpetrators from Christian backgrounds are not viewed as a national security threat and receive less media coverage. The media giving more attention to international terrorism and domestic terrorism only maximize terrorist propaganda impact. My conclusion, terrorism cannot be fully prevented, but the U.S. government is trying to fight terrorism with the right weapons by enforcing current policies, having more law enforcement officers patrolling communities, developing new strategies, and increasing penalties for those who commit terrorist crimes. As previously stated, social media and news media are platforms used by terrorists to maximize their propaganda impact, send threats, and recruit new members. The government and counterterrorism agencies are also using these platforms to make arrests, collect data, and inform citizens of potential threats. If the U.S. government continues to enforce current policies, increase penalties for terrorism, and use media against terrorism, these methods can help international terrorism remain low and prevent future attacks, especially domestic terrorist attacks such as mass shootings. These are my sources. Thank you so much for your time. You guys enjoy your winter break.